Hello, I'm Edgar Kramer from SoundStage Australia, and today I'm here with Rod Harris from Heschl Labs Audio, an Australian company specialising in high quality, high end amplification. Great to see you, Rod.
Great to see you too, Ed.
Rod, I wanted to start off by asking you if you can give us some sort of background on your where you come from in terms of your where you come from technically, and also what how you came about to start Heschel Audio Labs.
Well, it all sort of started when my dad bought me some Dick Smith kits. And so I assembled some kits and played around with electronics. And that's what I decided to do to pursue audio. He was also a sales manager for Pioneer Electronics in Victoria.
Right.
So I really listened to really high-end Pioneer electronics in the heyday in the mid-'80s and the early '90s. And so I really liked music and I liked audio. And so it all sort of came together later on when I started up my own business in 2000. I was a freelance electronic technician. And I started to go around recording studios doing studio wiring and got into vacuum tube audio in the early 2000s and decided to make amplifiers out of vacuum tubes and solid state.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into full vacuum tube amplifier designs and then back into solid state designs. So went full circle.
Sure, that's interesting. What made you decide to stick with solid state designs?
Well, just the reliability of solid state and the repeatability. With vacuum tubes, depending on where they were made, the new production valves are less reliable than the new old stock vacuum tubes. And but early solid state design didn't sound as good as the vacuum tube designs.
Yeah.
So I was finding out why is that so.
Okay, and what did you find?
Well, what I found is when you do full solid state designs with MOSFETs and had a driver stage that was fully Class A with high voltage on it, with high impedance feedback loop, then it sounded open as a valve, but then you had the speed and the punch of solid state. So that's how I ended up with this design now. And I've been designing amplifiers for the last 20 years.
Because I remember reading somewhere that you also, at one stage, I don't know how long for, you were repairing other manufacturers' products, amplification products. Did that give you, what sort of education or what sort of overview did that give you?
Yeah, it gave me a great overview to look at all the different designs. So I did pro audio as well as home hi-fi designs. So, yeah, I had an insight of a lot of the designs, particularly the solid state, were quite complex in nature.
Sure.
And the valve amplifiers that I come across were quite simple in design.
Okay. Did you find working on both pro audio and high-end audio amplification, were there any ideas that you took from one and the other to create your product?
Yes. With the pro audio, particularly mastering grade equipment, because I've worked for quite a few large studios, I saw that there was a lot of industrial grade electronics, so long life capacitors and industrial design implementations because it had to be reliable.
Sure.
Yeah. So it was like it's like a fusion of what the audiophile community, but also what the high in mastering grade equipment.
Sure.
So it's like the bit of those two worlds combined.
Okay. So my next question was about the HAL 350, which it's an integrated amplifier with a built-in R2R DAC, and I was going to ask you were your targets as far as designing that product on an engineering level, I guess, and most importantly, why you chose R2R when it's so much easier to do, and most people do this, Delta Sigma DACs. Not that they necessarily sound any better or worse. It always depends on implementation, but it's an unusual choice, is what I'm getting at, for an integrated amplifier. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I've built several DACs with Delta Sigma chips and with the Burr Brown PCM 1794 and the Sabre DAC from ESS Audio.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came across the discrete ladder DAC design, and then I designed my own discrete MOSFET power supplies to feed it, which made the biggest difference actually was power supply implementation.
Sure.
And it is the most natural sounding DAC I've ever heard. It's as closest to the original as you would hear in a mastering studio. And that's been the goal, is to plug a laptop into the back of an amplifier that had a built-in DAC, and then your output you connect to a pair of speakers, and you would be taken to the closest to the original production as the musician would intend it to sound. So it was very neutral, but it wasn't cold. It wasn't warm. It was as close to realism as possible. Very large, layered soundstage with reverb tails decaying into a very black background.
Okay, sounds very promising. Which brings me to your latest product, which was only just recently released, which is the HAL 300 Power Amplifier. So, if you can tell me a bit about that design.
Well, there was a call when I was down at the Hi-Fi show in Melbourne, a StereoNet Hi-Fi show. There was a few people that came up and said if you just had the amplifier on its own and it was priced around about the 10,000, we'd buy one. And there was also another hi-fi owner with Gold Coast Hi-Fi, Terry his name is, and he said the same thing. If you can just have that same amplifier sound, because a lot of people have got a good quality DAC and preamp, if you could just come up with an amplifier on its own. And so basically I took that same design of the amplifier on its own and put it in a chassis, and that's how we came up with the HAL 300.
Okay. So sorry, I was going to say that there are no differences in terms of amplification between the HAL 350 and HAL 300. Is it only just power, the 300 and 350 watts?
Power amp, and a slightly higher input impedance of 10 kilo ohms.
Okay. Have you, purely out of interest, have you had a comparison between the two, and do you have a preference in terms of purely amplification in terms of driving a loudspeaker?
Well, as long as you've got a good DAC that's... See, I've got a separate DAC, the ladder DAC, that I'll hook up to the amplifier. Sure. As a reference. Right. There's very little difference in the end result. If you've got a really good DAC, mm-hmm. And the speaker's been good quality, I've virtually got no preference from one to the other. It's almost identical design. Okay,
interesting. Now, just as a quick last question, we've in this country have had a bit of a checkered history in terms of manufacturing here in Australia, especially electronics. Where's the chassis built, and who is there a company that you outsource, or do you do some of that work in-house? Or
yeah, we outsource the CNC machining to a Gold Coast firm, mm-hmm. and I outsource the PCB manufacture, like the PCB boards, but the rest I do all myself. I hand solder all the individual parts, hand match all the MOSFETs, and put it all together in-house and test it here.
Sure. So it's really a fully Australian-made amplifier.
Yes, it is. Yeah, fully made here, and it was totally designed from the ground up. My own. It's not a copy of any other amplifier that's out there.
Sure. Okay, and last question. You mentioned that it's entirely, obviously, entirely your design and you manufacture it and so on. What do you think separates the HAL 350 or the HAL 300 from other amplifiers, other solid state amplifiers?
Oh, it's got a very large layered soundstage. That's the biggest difference, and it's very neutral, but it's quite warm in its presentation, so it's not dry. Some solid state amps can sound quite clinical and cold. The top end's very natural and it's very extended. It goes from 1 hertz to 200 kilohertz.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I very much look forward to reviewing the HAL 300. It's a new product from your company, so it's very exciting. And thank you once again, Rod Harris from Heschl Audio Labs.
You're welcome. Thank you.